Hey guys, Danny Johnson here, and today I wanted to show you the proper lift points on the 1994 through 2004 Ford Mustang, and just wanted to show you where you can lift, where you can put jack stands, and also why you might want to lift in those certain spots. So we'll begin at the front of the car, and this portion here is called the K member. It cradles the engine, and you can see it kind of represents a K. This is how it looks too. That's how you could remember that. But basically you can lift directly right here on the K member, and that'll lift the car in the air, and it'll lift both of the front wheels at the same time. So that's why this might be a good place to lift. However, be very, very cautious, because right next to this K member is the oil pan. And if your jack slips off of the K member and dents your oil pan, just like that, then you've had it. Also, keep in mind that as you're lifting, right here, it's a very, very slippery metal, and you'll notice the jack does tend to move forward and backward on that as you're lifting. So as you're using the jack, it's sometimes hard to keep an eye on this. You know, it's a bad habit, but it's typical for people just to put the jack under here where they know it's good, and then they just start cranking on it. So be very cautious that you don't have that jack slip off and mess up your oil pan. That could be a big problem. Next to the oil pan here on the control arms, you also are able to put a jack stand, but I would not jack on these. But according to the service manual, you can put a jack stand here. I don't like doing that just because the suspension compresses and moves around a lot. I don't feel like it's the safest place, but it is a recommended point there. So moving back on the car, if you can see here, you have these beams that are coming through here as part of the subframe. And so these beams that come back, the recommended lift point is right here on the very, very front. That's where it's the strongest. And as it goes back, it's a little bit weaker, and you can and will dent this up and damage it as you're lifting here. However, there really isn't too much more of an option, and what you need to do is lift with the jack back here so that you can then put the jack stand up here towards the front. You'll find that if you put the jack here and lift here, there's not going to be anywhere to put the jack stand because the jack will be in the way. So just keep that in mind. Now we're going to lift the car into the air on the front. So we came in with our jack here towards the back and lifted up so that we had room to place our jack stand. You want to make sure that it's cradling this beam perfectly. So as you're lifting the other side of the car, pay very special close attention to the jack on this side and make sure that it's still secure and not being tipped over. One thing I really want to strongly recommend, and some of the Mustangs like the Mach 1 and some of the convertibles and possibly the Bullet Mustang, some of them come with subframe connectors. And it's something you can buy aftermarket as well. My Cobra has them. And what they are is it's a bar that pretty much bolts to this, and it connects the front subframe to the rear. And it helps with stability for the car, but honestly, I'm more happy with it that it is a good place to put a jack and jack stand, because as you lift on them, they're strong bars and they don't bend. And if they did, you're not messing up this part of the car, which if your car is a collector item or you're trying to keep it really nice for future resale, you know, you want to keep this really nice so you don't have someone look under there and see it all dented up. So strongly I'd recommend subframe connectors to connect these two pieces and use those to lift on. Now the car also has some factory lift points, and so there's a pinch weld that pretty much where the red and the black start on the car, it's going to run all the way from the front to the back of the car, and it's just a piece of metal that's been pinched together, going all the way through, and there's a tiny little cutout towards the front and one towards the back that you can see, and that's where the factory jack that comes in the trunk that's meant for your roadside repair, that's where that is supposed to go, and you only want to put it in those little grooves. You'll see all the time those pinch welds where other people have lifted and bent it and damaged it. That's pretty common. So once again, up here, this is kind of the recommended lift point here, and I'd say lift with the jack here and put the jack stand here. That's what I do in all the videos, and make sure that that jack stand's cradling that very nice. Take note that you do have a whole bunch of lines coming through here, and you don't want to damage any of those. So you have to be very careful. You want to drop the jack completely before pulling it out of the car. You don't want to, let the car down and then jam that jack into those lines. So you want to be very careful. Moving towards the back of the car, I want to point out that you do have these boxes here, and they are not a lift point. This is actually just part of the floor plan, and it dents very easily. The proper lift point is actually right around here, and it's called a torque box. And so that's where you want to lift. You'll see it under there where it flattens out into a square, and you'll see it where it's flattened out and it's built for a lift. When you go to take your car to a shop, the lift is going to go through here, and that's where they're going to put them, is here and then back here. So coming to the rear of the car, you have your rear axle coming through here, and the only thing the manual will recommend is a jack stand point on both of these axle tubes. I personally don't like lifting there just because these axle tubes are pressed in. You can have them welded, but it may be okay. I just don't like lifting somewhere where the tubes have just been pressed in. Now you can lift right here on the center of the axle. People do it all the time. The reason why it's not a recommended lift point is because as soon as you lift a rear-wheel drive car in the air, it's going to roll. The only thing that's keeping a car from rolling, a rear-wheel drive one, is the rear brakes, which is the parking brake, or having the car in gear. So you want to be very careful not to lift here, especially if the car's on any kind of slope. You want to make sure you chock those wheels real good. And when lifting on the rear differential, you want to avoid this cover, and there's a little lip on that cover, and if you lift on that and damage it, it can leak differential fluid. So I would strongly recommend not lifting on the differential. People have done it, and it's mainly to save time, because like the K member in the front, if you lift here, it puts the whole back of the car in the air at the same time, so you're not doing one at a time. So just keep that in mind. Anyway, the reason that you would want to come in and lift on the sides here, obviously, is to get the front of the car in the air. You could lift back here on these torque boxes to get the rear of the car in the air. But what you'll find is if you lift on the torque box here, there's nowhere to put a jack stand. So you're going to have to lift here and then go around to the other side and put a jack stand on the torque box, and then come over, and when you drop the floor jack, then it'll also keep this end of the car in the air, since that floor jack's in place. So the only real way that you can really get the rear of these cars in the air is to lift on one side, put a jack stand on the other, drop it, and then put the other jack stand over here, or if you lift right on that differential. So that's just something to keep in mind. Also, just worth mentioning on the SVT Cobra, the 99, the 01, the 2000 Cobra R, the 03, 04 Cobra, it has independent rear suspension, and so you're still once again stuck to putting it on these torque boxes to really lift. You can maybe get away with putting a jack stand under these, but I'm not going to recommend that. So anyway, that's just where you can lift, and just want to be very careful when you're doing so that you're not crunching the car up. If you're starting to lift and you hear noises, then stop right away, and just be very careful not to damage your car and make sure that you're very safe. Thanks for watching, guys.